I never thought betrayal could wear the face of someone you loved for a decade. That it could walk into your home like it belonged there. That it could smile at you during dinner, sit beside you on the couch, and whisper, "I love you," with conviction. But betrayal isn't just a one-time event. It's a slow poison, and I was gulping it down with every dinner, every phone call, every "I'm proud of you" from people who were only proud when they needed something from me. I grew up believing that hard work and loyalty were all you needed to build a good life. I believed that love, when earned, stayed. And I really believed that family, true family, would never throw you to the wolves. I was wrong. My name's Mason. I'm 31. And for most of my adult life, I thought I was winning. Graduated top of my class, got into software architecture early, and started my own firm by 27. The money followed. Not insane influencer-level wealth, but I was comfortable. Real estate investments, dividends, a beach house I rarely visited. I wasn't flashy, just stable. And that seemed to make me the designated safety net in my family. It started small. A little money here and there for my mom and dad when my dad's construction business hit a rough patch. Then it was my sister Jade, who needed help covering rent after another failed relationship and quitting another job. I helped, because that's what you do. Because we're family. When I met Tessa, I thought everything was finally lining up. We were both 23. I met her at a friend's engagement party, one of those awkward backyard setups with folding chairs and too much sangria. Tessa was magnetic. Sharp-tongued but funny, cynical but not bitter. She worked in interior design and had this ability to make any space feel like home. Within a year, she moved into my apartment. 2 years later, I bought a townhouse and gave her full reign to make it ours. She wanted to take her time with marriage, and I respected that. I wasn't in a rush either. We were together for 8 years. Built a life. Hosted holidays. I invested in her small design firm when she decided to go solo. And when she made her first real profit, she bought me a vintage watch I'd been eyeing for months. I thought we were solid. Soulmate level, even. But if I'm honest, things started to shift a year before everything unraveled. It was subtle at first. Tessa got closer to my younger cousin Leo. Leo was 26, freeloading off family charm and decent looks. The kind of guy who knew just how to say the right thing at the right time, but you wouldn't trust with your dog for a weekend. He bounced between jobs, never quite making anything of himself, but always had an excuse. Always had a story. I never saw the red flags. Or maybe I did, but I didn't want to believe them. Tessa and Leo got close after he crashed at our place for a couple nights. That turned into 3 weeks. He'd just gotten dumped and needed space. Tessa said he needed support, that he'd always looked up to me and felt ashamed. I believed her. Leo always laughed at my jokes, said he wanted to be like me. Why wouldn't I believe that? But he overstayed. Tessa insisted we not charge him rent. She said he was getting back on his feet. And I let it go because she seemed happy to have him around, and I was buried in a product launch with my firm. That's when the strange stuff started. Leo and Tessa would be whispering in the kitchen when I came home. Conversations that stopped as soon as I stepped in. She'd laugh more at his jokes than mine. I chalked it up to stress. Burnout. Maybe I was imagining things. Until the night of my birthday. We had a small get-together at the townhouse. Just close friends and family. Tessa made my favorite meal, and everything seemed perfect. Until I walked in on Leo holding her wrist in the hallway. It wasn't overtly romantic, not outright flirtation, but it was too intimate, too familiar. She pulled away fast, and he laughed like it was nothing. She said he was just thanking her for helping him land a client. But something in the air changed. I felt it. I just didn't act on it. 3 months later, I noticed money missing from one of my accounts. A shared account Tessa used for business expenses. There were odd charges, hotels, dinners, even a weekend retreat she said was for networking. The receipt said otherwise. Romantic getaway packages. Couple spa sessions. When I confronted her, she cried. Said it was a mistake, that she'd used the wrong card. That she went with a friend. I wanted to believe her. So I did. And then came the twist that split my world apart. One Friday evening, I came home early. The office had a plumbing emergency, and we shut down for the day. I walked through the front door expecting to find Tessa working or watching one of her renovation shows. Instead, I heard her laugh. From upstairs. The kind of laugh I hadn't heard in months. I moved quietly. Something in me already knew. And there they were. In our bedroom. Tessa. And Leo. I froze. I didn't shout. Didn't throw anything. I stood there and watched for exactly 4 seconds. Then I turned and walked out. That night, I checked our security cam footage, one of the side cameras near the back patio. Turns out, this wasn't their first time. It had been going on for at least 5 months. And the money? Every cent of it had gone toward their little romantic escapades. The next morning, I began the purge. I moved fast and quiet. No shouting. No confrontation. Just action. By sunrise, I'd already pulled my personal funds from every joint account, locked out access to the townhouse security system, changed the garage code, made a call to my lawyer, and began the process of reclaiming full ownership of the property, something I'd made sure to protect contractually even when we moved in together. I wasn't about to be the idiot who paid for his own humiliation. Tessa woke up to find her credit cards declined and her key fob disabled. I watched her from the front window as she stood outside, phone in hand, trying to reach me. I didn't answer. Instead, I sent her a single message. You have 48 hours to vacate. A moving crew will be there tomorrow to pack your things. You don't need to be present. Her reply was a string of frantic calls and voicemails that I didn't listen to. The part that would have shattered me a year ago now felt like static in the background. Whatever pain I might have felt had already been cauterized by the image of them together in my bed. Our bed. She left quietly. I let the movers do their thing, boxed her life into plastic tubs, and left them in the storage locker I prepaid for 3 months. Sent her the code. That was the last act of kindness I gave her. But I wasn't done. Leo, however, didn't go as quietly. 2 days later, I was pulled aside at my office. Security said someone had shown up at the lobby looking for me, causing a scene. I already knew who it was before they said his name. Leo. The audacity of this guy could have powered a city block. He tried to play it cool when I met him downstairs, smirking like we were about to squash some petty misunderstanding. Look, man, it wasn't supposed to happen like that, he said. You weren't around. She was lonely. We didn't mean to. I didn't say a word. Just held up my phone and hit play. The audio from the security cam feed. Tessa's voice, whispering things I didn't know she was capable of saying. Then Leo's, laughing and mocking how I never suspected a thing. How easy it was to manipulate someone who thinks logic solves everything. I watched his face drop. I'm pressing charges, I said. You accessed my home under false pretenses. You stole funds through collusion. I have a forensic accountant already building a case. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. He tried to stammer something, a weak apology muttering how he could pay me back. How it was just a mistake. A moment. 5 months of moments? I asked. That's one hell of a coincidence. And I left him there, in the lobby, jaw clenched and eyes wide. But here's where it gets strange, where the second betrayal caught me completely off guard. That night, I got a call from my mother. Now, you have to understand, my parents weren't the warm, storybook type. They were transactional. Support was given when it was convenient. Praise was reserved for accomplishments they could brag about to neighbors. But betrayal? That, I didn't see coming. Mason, she said, her voice syrupy, like she hadn't just ignored me for 3 months after I turned down yet another loan for her boutique candle business. We need to talk about what happened with Tessa. My stomach dropped. Not because I thought she'd be outraged on my behalf. I didn't expect that. But what came next made the room feel like it shrank around me. She told me everything, my mom continued. And honestly, I think you're being too harsh. I didn't speak. I let her keep digging the hole. You know, Tessa always felt like you were distant. Like she was just there. A piece of furniture. Leo's got his flaws, sure, but at least he makes people feel seen. Maybe you pushed her to this without realizing. My hand tightened around the phone. She came to us crying, she said. She doesn't want to lose the family over a mistake. And Leo, he's family, Mason. This isn't something we can't work through. And that's when it clicked. They knew. They knew. Maybe not the whole time, but for weeks, maybe longer. They've been talking to Tessa behind my back. Leo too, I later found out. My own mother had invited Tessa to brunch the weekend after I'd thrown her out of the house. They'd taken her side. They'd decided, quietly, that Leo was the better match. That I'd work myself to death anyway, and she deserved someone who could make her smile. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a conspiracy. The people who raised me, who asked me for money every few months, who smiled in every holiday photo, who sent texts that ended in, love you, proud of you, don't forget us. They were cheering from the sidelines while my cousin slept with the woman I planned to marry. I didn't scream, didn't hang up. I listened, until she finally said, just think about it, okay? Maybe give them a chance to apologize. Family can get past things like this. And I said, you're right. She sounded surprised. I am. Yeah, family can get past things. But only if there's still family left. Then I blocked her. Blocked my dad, my sister, anyone in the circle who knew and said nothing. And I started cutting off every single pipeline they had to me. I left the group chats, changed my number, pulled my name from the deed of the beach house and sold my share to a silent partner. Froze every joint account I'd ever been on. Canceled the emergency credit cards. Changed the locks on the storage property they used for free. Donated everything they left behind to a women's shelter. For the first time in my life, I was free from all of them. But freedom, as I soon learned, doesn't come without echoes. Especially when your silence costs people their comfort. Silence, it turns out, is louder than any confrontation. The more I pulled away, the more desperate the noise around me became. My cousin, my parents, even a few of Tessa's friends tried reaching out through mutual connections, at first with concern, then with outrage. The prevailing narrative was clear. I was being cold, harsh, unforgiving. I was acting like a stranger to the people who'd always been there for me. Ironic, really, because when I was signing checks to cover Jade's last eviction notice, I don't remember a single thank you. When I floated the down payment on my parents' second property in Charleston as an investment, they told the neighbors it was a business loan, not a gift. And when Leo wrecked his car and I quietly paid off the repo fees so it wouldn't damage our family's credit history, not even a damn phone call. Now that the money stopped, though, everyone suddenly found religion. At work, I buried myself in code, in blueprints, and pitch decks. We were prepping to scale, and I was more determined than ever to make the company impenetrable. The townhouse felt cavernous without Tessa's things, but I welcomed the quiet. Replaced the couch she picked. Tore down the backsplash she swore by. I stripped the house down to its bones and rebuilt it for me. 3 weeks into the blackout, Jade showed up at my front door. I only opened it because I saw her through the Ring camera and didn't want her camping out on my lawn. She looked exhausted, and not the kind of exhaustion that comes from a bad breakup. No makeup. Hair in a messy knot. She stood with her arms wrapped tight around herself like the cold had finally cracked her open. I know I'm the last person you want to see, she started. You're not wrong, I said. I didn't know, she added quickly. About Leo and Tessa. I swear I didn't. I leaned against the doorway. But you knew something was off, didn't you? She bit her lip. Yeah. They got weird. Flirty. But I thought it was just Tessa being playful. I didn't think they were, sleeping together? I finished. She looked away. I don't know what you want from me, Jade. She looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw the girl I used to fight with over cereal. The kid who used to fake cry so I'd get in trouble. She was shaking. I need help, she said. I lost my job last week. And Mom and Dad are maxed out. I've been sleeping in my car. I closed my eyes. There it was, the gut punch of guilt I was raised on. But then I opened them. And I remembered. Remembered when she laughed along to Leo's jokes about how Mason thinks money makes him interesting. Remembered how she once said Tessa was too hot for me and that she was probably just with me for the stability. Remembered the time she borrowed my car and returned it reeking of weed and fast food, then blamed a friend. You need a place to crash? I asked. She nodded, hopeful. There's a shelter downtown, I said. They've got hot meals and beds. I'll text you the address. Her face fell like I'd slapped her. You're serious? She whispered. Jade, you didn't just watch me get played. You laughed while it happened. I was your brother. Your actual family. And you let them humiliate me. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't know it was this bad. I stepped back and started to close the door. Now you do. And I shut it. That night, I lay awake wondering if I'd gone too far. If the ice in my chest was starting to spread too deep. But then I remembered something Tessa once said, something I had ignored at the time. You're the safe one, she told me. You'll never leave. That's what makes you different. She meant it as a compliment. But now, it felt like a curse. They all counted on my loyalty. My silence. My forgiveness. They banked on me being the guy who'd never burn a bridge. Who'd always choose family over pride. That's why what happened next was almost poetic. It started as a whisper, a message from a mutual friend, asking if I'd seen the GoFundMe. I hadn't. Turns out, Leo had run into legal trouble. Again. This time, he wasn't sleeping with anyone's fiancée, as far as I knew. But he had convinced a client to front him $15,000 for a marketing gig he never delivered on. When they sued, he ghosted them. Again. The story was all over the local business forums. The GoFundMe was created by my mother. Titled, Help Our Son Recover from a Setback. A masterpiece of revisionist history. She wrote about how Leo had been exploited by bad actors and how mental health struggles had led him to make regrettable decisions. She said the family was doing all we can, but without outside help, they might lose everything. The comments were even worse. People donating, praising the courage of the family, calling Leo a resilient young man, saying how proud they were of my parents for standing by him. That would have been enough to make me retch. But then I saw it. A comment from Tessa. I know he made mistakes, she wrote, but he's not a bad person. He just needs help. We all fall down sometimes. I laughed. Out loud. In the middle of my empty kitchen. They really thought they could spin this into a redemption arc. That people would forget. That I would forget. So I did what any betrayed man with too much time and a clean conscience would do. I shared the footage. Just one clip. A 15-second video from my security cam, showing Tessa and Leo, hands all over each other, in the home I paid for. I didn't add commentary. Just posted it anonymously in the GoFundMe comment thread with the caption, "Some setbacks are earned." And then I watched the world catch fire. The campaign got pulled within the hour. Donations dried up. Comments turned savage. People reposted the clip across every thread tied to Leo's name. Tessa deleted her socials within 2 days. I thought that would be the end of it. But karma, it seems, had one more twist for me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The weight of what had happened was still there, but it was lighter somehow, like the dust settling after a storm. I could look at my life and see the wreckage of the past few months and still feel something resembling peace. What I had done, what I'd allowed myself to do, had finally cleared the path for something better. For me, it was like stepping into the sun after years of living in shadow. But then, just when I thought I was free, I got another message. This one wasn't from Tessa. It wasn't from Leo or my parents. This time, it was from someone I hadn't heard from in years. David. David was my old friend from college. The one guy who was always there when I needed him. The one who picked me up after my first failed relationship. The guy who came to visit when I closed on the townhouse. He'd been the one to drive me to the hospital when my mom had that scare a couple of years ago. We were tight. Blood brothers, as we used to joke. Until he sided with Leo over me, that is. I didn't even know how it happened. He hadn't exactly picked a side, but one day, it was like he just vanished. He stopped replying to texts. Stopped showing up to group hangouts. When we ran into each other at a party, he barely made eye contact. And I found out why months later, when Tessa confessed that she'd been seeing David on the side, just a few weeks after she'd moved in. It had been a short affair, something she called needy but harmless. At the time, I didn't even know how to feel. I'd already been so numb to the betrayal by Leo that I couldn't even muster anger at David. Maybe I just didn't want to. Maybe I was tired of the drama. So, I let it go. What's one more betrayal in a world full of them? David's message, though, wasn't about apologies or trying to explain himself. It was a request. He wanted to meet. And that's where things got complicated. Because as much as I told myself I didn't care about David anymore, there was a small, twisted part of me that did. A part of me that wanted to hear why he chose Leo's side. A part of me that wanted to look him in the eye and ask what it was like to be so easily swayed. What it was like to abandon someone who had been there for him in ways no one else had. So, I agreed to meet. We decided to meet at a small bar near my office, the kind that doesn't get too loud even on a Friday night. I showed up early, ordered a whiskey, and tried to calm my nerves. I hadn't seen David in over a year, and the last time we spoke, he was with Leo and Tessa at a mutual friend's wedding. He'd given me a half-assed apology for not keeping in touch, but I knew it wasn't real. It wasn't the apology I wanted. And deep down, I knew it wasn't the apology I would ever get. David arrived 15 minutes late, looking thinner than I remembered. His jaw was tighter, his eyes too wide, and there was a nervous energy in his step. He looked like a man who knew he was about to walk into a storm. "I wasn't sure you'd show," he said, setting his coat down. His voice had that old crack in it, the one that told me he was just as uncomfortable as I was. "I almost didn't," I replied. We sat down. He ordered a beer and pushed his glass toward me. The clinking of the ice in my glass sounded too loud. The awkwardness between us was thick enough to choke on. "I know we don't really talk anymore," he began. "And I know I fucked up. You probably think I'm the worst kind of friend." "The worst?" I cut in, my voice sharp. "You're not the worst kind of friend. You're the kind who leaves without warning, who watches you get stabbed in the back and doesn't even flinch." David swallowed hard, then sighed. "Yeah, I deserve that. I do. I really do." I've been thinking about this for months, Mason, and I don't know how to fix what I've done. I guess I don't even know if it's possible. I leaned back in my chair and studied him. No, you don't know how to fix it, but you sure as hell know how to ask for forgiveness. Like it's just going to come from nowhere. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said, his voice shaking. I just need you to know that I never meant to hurt you. Leo, Tessa, shit. They both came to me. Told me stories. About how you were so focused on work you were forgetting what was important. They made you sound unapproachable. And yeah, I fell for it. So you sided with them, I said, my voice cold. Because you didn't want to see the truth. David nodded. Yeah, that's the worst part. I didn't want to believe you could be the guy they said you were. But when it all fell apart, I couldn't escape the truth. I saw it in your eyes when I didn't have the guts to look you in the face. I studied him for a long time. The guilt was there, visible in the way he couldn't meet my eyes, in the way he was holding on to his beer like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. You don't get to fix this by showing up and asking for forgiveness, I said finally. You can't just waltz in like nothing happened and hope I'll forget how many times you let me down. This? What happened with Tessa? With Leo? I don't even care about your apology. I'm done with you. I'm done with all of it. I stood up before he could respond, my chair scraping against the floor. Mason, please. I'm not interested in hearing more excuses, I interrupted. You made your choices. And I made mine. I left the bar without a second glance, and the cool night air hit me like a breath of fresh air. There was no anger left in me anymore. No hatred. Just a finality. I had nothing left to give them. Not Leo. Not David. Not even my parents. When I walked out of that bar, I felt like I was walking away from a chapter that had been dragging me through the mud for far too long. I had a life to rebuild. A life where I was no one's fallback plan. Where I wasn't defined by the family who thought they could bleed me dry. That night, I went home, unpacked my gym bag, and ordered takeout. It was just me. For the first time in what felt like forever. And I could breathe. A couple of months passed. The noise from my family died down. Tessa and Leo disappeared into the wreckage of their own choices, their lives crashing like dominoes, and I was finally able to enjoy the peace I'd fought so hard for. My days were filled with focus, with progress, things that had always felt impossible when I was tethered to the chaos of other people's messes. It was strange, at first. I didn't miss them, not my parents, not my cousins, not even Tessa. I felt no guilt, no desire to fix what they'd broken. I had come to terms with the fact that the people who should have been my foundation had instead used me as a crutch, and now that crutch was gone. I was free. Work had been good to me in ways I hadn't expected. The promotion I'd secured after walking away from my old life had opened doors. Clients I'd once only dreamed of working with started calling me directly. My firm began taking on projects that pushed me to think beyond what I thought I was capable of. I was getting recognized in the industry, not just for my results, but for the ability to lead with a clear vision and a sense of integrity that had once been a liability. Turns out, not letting your family drain your life force made you more productive. In the gym, my mornings were filled with a new kind of intensity. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was discipline. It was ownership over my body, my future, my life. I trained with a purpose, focusing on mastering my craft, boxing, strength training. There was nothing else that demanded my attention more than the weight of the bag in front of me, the rhythm of my breathing, the next rep. I found peace in the sweat. But life, as it always does, has a way of reminding you that you're never truly out of the loop. Especially when you've been as deep into the drama as I had. One evening, just as I was finishing up a grueling sparring session, I got a text. It was from my mom. I hadn't heard from her directly in months, but I had kept the lines open for any legitimate business. She never really cared about me, but she had always been quick to call when it was time to play her hand. I was almost expecting this moment. Still, I wasn't prepared for what she would ask. Her text read, Mason, I hate to ask, but we need your help. Your father's health has taken a turn, and we're in serious trouble. We don't have anyone else to turn to. Please. There it was. The familiar pull. The guilt. The manipulation. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, reading and rereading the message. The guilt tried to creep in, tried to remind me of every time I had bailed them out, every time I had wiped their tears, every time I had been their safety net. I could already hear my mom's voice, all trembling and panicked, painting the picture of how bad things were, how much they needed me. For a moment, I actually considered it. I considered going back to the old ways. I thought about how hard my dad worked and how he'd sacrificed so much for the family. I thought about the nights he stayed up late trying to finish projects, the times he didn't get paid for his work, the way he'd always told me I'd be the one to save them in the end. Then, I remembered the betrayal. All of it. The lies. The manipulations. The way they had thrown me under the bus without a second thought. How they had sided with Leo and Tessa. How they'd chosen them over me. Chosen money over loyalty. Chosen their golden child who could do no wrong, even when he was the root of their problems. It was a trap. One they had set for me time and time again. I deleted the message. I didn't respond. I didn't waste any more of my energy thinking about it. I had spent so much of my life trying to please people who would never be satisfied, who took everything from me without ever giving a single ounce of gratitude or respect in return. I wasn't their bailout. I wasn't their backup. I was done being the one who fixed everything while they lived their lives in the chaos of their own making. I was done. The next morning, I woke up with a new resolve. I packed up a few things, canceled a few old connections, and bought a one-way ticket to the West Coast. I wasn't running from my problems, but I was distancing myself from the cycle that had kept me trapped for so long. It was time to leave everything behind, to start over, without the weight of the past, without the drama, without them. The first few weeks of being on my own felt like the first breath I'd ever taken. Every morning, I could focus on what I wanted, not what others expected from me. There were no phone calls about money, no emergency requests for help, no more guilt trips. It was just me. And for the first time in my life, I was learning what it meant to be completely selfish. I rented an apartment in a quiet neighborhood by the beach, somewhere that didn't care about who I was or what my family thought I should be. The place had a view of the ocean. I'd always dreamed of living near the water, but I'd never been able to because the idea of family and responsibility always held me back. Now, I could sit on the balcony at sunrise, sip my coffee, and finally feel like I was in control of my own life. But the thing about leaving your old life behind? It has a funny way of following you, even when you think you've outrun it. A month later, I heard from Leo. He was in trouble. Again. This time, it was worse. He'd gotten himself tangled in a messy situation with a loan shark over unpaid debts and was asking for help. I was tempted to laugh, to text him back and say, "What goes around comes around." But I didn't. I had already learned something about myself through all of this. I didn't need to see someone else suffer for what they did to me to feel better. The satisfaction I thought I would get from seeing Leo squirm had already faded. The need to get back at them for all the wrongs had lost its weight. So, I blocked him. I blocked everyone. Every number, every account. No more reaching out. No more dragging myself back into their web. The universe had a way of handling people like them. And as much as it hurt to accept, I wasn't their savior. I was my own. The months that followed were the best of my life. I embraced the peace I had fought so hard for, not just by distancing myself from the people who had drained me, but by building a life I could finally be proud of on my own terms. I immersed myself in work and personal growth, finding a new rhythm to my days that didn't include any lingering anxiety about what my family needed from me next. I became the version of myself I'd always wanted to be. The person who made decisions based on his own happiness, not the expectations of others. I enrolled in a few art classes, spent weekends exploring the coast, and for the first time in years, I actually slept without that nagging feeling of guilt or dread in the pit of my stomach. I made new friends, too. People who didn't need my money or my support but simply enjoyed my company. Real friends. The kind who invited me out to see live music, or who cared about my thoughts on things other than business or financial stability. They made me realize how isolated I had been for so long, surrounded by people who only cared about what I could provide for them. One night, a few months in, I found myself sitting at a bar with one of those new friends. His name was Mark, an old college buddy who just moved to the area. We were sipping beers, talking about work, life, and the usual banter when he mentioned something that almost made me choke on my drink. "You've heard about Leo, right?" he asked. I froze, the familiar ache of resentment and anger flaring up for a split second. I could feel my pulse quicken, my fists clenching, but I didn't show it. Not this time. I'd made it clear to myself that Leo, my old family, was a chapter one had closed. And yet, hearing his name, hearing about the fallout, it was like stepping into the past again. For a moment, I almost wanted to care. Why would I want to know about Leo? I asked, my tone casual. Mark looked at me like he was waiting for me to crack, but I didn't. Instead, I kept my focus on the beer in front of me. "It's just, people are talking about him," Mark continued. Apparently, after the whole scandal with you, well, he's in even worse shape. Gambling. Again. Lost his job. The usual story. And it's like people are finally seeing what you always knew. I could barely suppress the half-laugh that threatened to escape. Yeah, no surprise there, I said, shrugging. The part of me that had once obsessed over getting even, over watching Leo face the consequences of his actions, realized in that moment that none of it mattered anymore. Sure, I'd been the one left in the dust, but he was still stuck in the same endless cycle of self-destruction. And yet, it didn't bring me the satisfaction I thought it would. There was no gloating, no sense of justice served. Just nothing. Just indifference. That's the thing about letting go. It doesn't feel like triumph. It just feels like peace. And that's when I realized it for the first time. I wasn't interested in revenge. Not anymore. I didn't need to see Leo's life spiral further. I didn't need to witness my family's downfall. The truth was, I'd spent years being tied to them, hoping that somehow, in some twisted way, they'd change. But they never did. They had always taken, always used me. Now, the freedom I felt wasn't about burning bridges or proving a point. It was simply about living. And in the end, that was the biggest revenge I could ever get. A few weeks later, I got a message from my father. It wasn't the usual begging for money, nor was it a come home, we need to talk plea. It was just a simple message. I don't expect anything from you. I don't deserve it. But I wanted to tell you, we made a mistake. I made a mistake. I was wrong about you. And I'm sorry. I wish you all the best, son. I didn't reply. In that moment, I realized something that had been eating at me for so long. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need anything from them. Because the person I had become, the one I was proud of, the one who had let go of their toxic hold, was stronger and better off without them. Over the next few months, I started a new chapter, not just with the people I had chosen to keep in my life, but with a new sense of who I was. And I did it all without the expectations of anyone else, without looking back. It was no longer about what they had taken from me. It was about what I was building for myself. When I sat at the beach one evening, watching the sunset with a cold drink in my hand, I realized something. I was finally living for me. I was no longer the guy who could be counted on to carry the weight of others' failures. I was the guy who carried the weight of his own success. And that was enough.